In June of 2025, at 43, I retired early. Not because I hit the lottery, not because I inherited money, and definitely not because I made six figures my whole career. For most of my career taking X-rays, I made about $44,000 to $55,000 a year. The year before I retired, I made $69,000. So this isn't one of those I got rich overnight stories. What made this possible wasn't my income. It was structure. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through the exact structure I followed, how I lowered my cost of living, how I acquired income-producing assets, how I used leverage strategically, and the final decisions in 2025 that allowed me to walk away at 43. No hype, no shortcuts, just the structure I used to retire early. All right. Step 1. Lower your cost of living first. Before I bought rentals, before I used leverage, and before any of the strategic moves, I focused on one thing: lowering the amount of money I needed to live each month. Not my income, my expenses. Around 2012, I started learning about the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. But the book that really shifted my thinking was Early Retirement Extreme by Jacob Lund Fisker. It wasn't just about retiring early, it was about perspective. It challenged the idea that you need a high income to build freedom. Instead, it asked a different question. What if you designed your life to cost less? That shift had a huge impact on how I made decisions from that point forward, because financial independence isn't magic. It's math. Your passive income needs to cover your monthly expenses. So if your life costs $5,000 a month, you need $5,000 in passive income. If your life costs $1,800 a month, you only need $1,800. That difference determines how many assets you need. At the time, I was living in a 552 square foot home. One bedroom, one bathroom, small mortgage, very manageable payment. It wasn't flashy, but it was efficient, and efficiency is powerful. When my income increased over the years, I didn't automatically upgrade my lifestyle. I kept the same clothes, I kept the same car, and I avoided buying consumer items I didn't actually need. In other words, I tried to keep my expenses stable, because every dollar I didn't upgrade became a dollar I could invest. That gap between what I earned and what I needed became the capital I used to buy income-producing assets. This is the step most people skip. They try to build passive income on top of an already expensive lifestyle. I did the opposite. I reduced the lifestyle first, because the smaller your required monthly expenses are, the fewer assets you need to become free. That's the foundation. Everything else rests on that. Step 2. Acquire your first income-producing asset. By 2018, I had the mindset foundation in place, but mindset alone doesn't retire you. Assets do. So in 2018, I made a strategic reset. I sold my primary home and moved into an apartment, and instead of upgrading, I did the opposite. I took the proceeds and bought a beat-up house for $45,000 cash. No mortgage, no payment, fully paid off. Now, why would I do that? Because a paid-off property gives you leverage, not emotional leverage, financial leverage. Then I made a key decision. I didn't treat it like a home, I treated it like an asset. I decided to rent it out. Instead of owning a property with potential value, I converted it into a cash-flowing asset that started working for me. That shift matters. Owning real estate isn't the goal. Cash flow is. Once the house was rented and producing income, I opened a commercial line of credit against it. That line of credit became my liquidity. Most people build a large emergency fund in cash. I chose access to capital instead. That's not for everyone, but for me it created flexibility. If something broke, I could access cash, and if an opportunity came up, I had access to capital. That way my money wasn't sitting idle in a savings account. This is an important blueprint principle. Build one stable, low-risk asset first, something paid off that sends you cash every month and gives you leverage access without costing you freedom. That $45,000 house wasn't glamorous, but it became the financial base everything else was built on. Step 3. Use controlled leverage. Once I had one stable, income-producing property working, I moved to the next phase. Controlled leverage. This is where most people either accelerate or blow themselves up. At this point, my income hadn't changed dramatically. I was still making roughly $44,000 to $55,000 a year taking X-rays. So this wasn't fueled by a massive salary, it was fueled by structure. My first move was taking an $8,800 loan from my 401k. Now let me be clear. This was a risk. If I had lost my job, that loan would have needed to be paid back quickly to avoid penalties. So this wasn't casual, it was calculated. I used that $8,800 as a down payment on another rental property. That property was about $40,000. Now I had two income producing properties. That's when the stacking effect begins. But the real acceleration came next. I used the line of credit from the first paid off house to put $6,000 down on a duplex as an owner occupant. That duplex was about $85,000. This is an important blueprint move. Here's why. Owner-occupied duplexes typically give you better loan terms, lower interest rates, and lower down payment requirements. I moved into one side of the duplex and rented out the other side. Now I had rental income from the first property, rental income from the second property, and partial rental income from the duplex. 3 income streams. After about a year and a half, I moved out of the duplex and back into an apartment. Then I rented out the other side of the duplex. Now both sides were producing income. At that point, I had 4 tenants total across my properties. Here's the blueprint principle. Leverage is dangerous when used emotionally, but leverage is powerful when used with cash flow. Each property had a plan. Each one either produced income immediately or had a clear path to producing income. I wasn't buying based on appreciation hopes. I was building cash flow deliberately, and I was doing it on a middle-class income. That's important, because this wasn't about earning more. It was about structuring differently. Step 4, recycle capital and eliminate debt. At this point, I had multiple income-producing properties, but there was still leverage in the system. A line of credit, mortgage on the duplex, and a loan on the single-family rental. This is where discipline matters. One of the original properties, the $45,000 house I bought in 2018, had appreciated significantly. When the tenant moved out, I had a decision to make. Re-rent it or recycle the capital. I chose to sell it and I doubled my money. And when I sold it, the line of credit tied to that property went away. Now this next part is very important. Instead of upgrading my lifestyle, I made another structural decision. I used the proceeds to build the house I live in now. 576 square feet. Small, efficient, built with cash, and with no mortgage. The total build cost was about $60,000. The land was around $12,000. So for roughly $72,000 total, I eliminated my housing payment completely. Now here's something important. That didn't happen by accident. Years earlier, I read a book called Building an Affordable House: Trade Secrets to High-Value, Low-Cost Construction by Fernando Pages Ruiz. This book completely shifted my perspective on what a home actually needs to cost. It changed how I thought about square footage, finishes, and design. I'll break down exactly how I did that in another video, but the key point here is this: lowering your personal housing cost accelerates everything. And once that piece of the structure was locked in, the next phase was obvious. From there, I shifted fully into debt elimination mode. I focused first on paying down the second single-family rental, the one originally purchased using the 401k loan. Eventually, that single-family rental was paid off. Once it was paid off, I opened a commercial line of credit against it. At that point, there was still a remaining balance on the 401k loan. Instead of continuing to let it amortize slowly through payroll deductions, I used the line of credit to eliminate the remaining balance in one move. That simplified the structure. One less payment, one less obligation, and one less moving part. That's when I began using paycheck parking. Here's how paycheck parking works in simple terms. I would pull out $5,000 chunks at a time and apply them directly toward the duplex balance. Then, instead of letting my paycheck sit in a checking account, I would deposit it immediately into the line of credit. Because interest is calculated daily, lowering that balance as soon as possible reduces the amount of interest accruing. As expenses came up throughout the month, I would draw from the line of credit as needed. The result was that my income was constantly working to reduce principal instead of sitting idle. It's not a trick, it's just cash flow efficiency. But this only works if you're disciplined and your income is stable. Without discipline, it can create more debt instead of eliminating it. Used correctly, it accelerates payoff. Used emotionally, it does the opposite. Step 5. Convert structure into freedom. At this point, the only major debt remaining was the duplex. Everything else was paid off. I had a debt-free primary home, a debt-free single-family rental, a duplex with a remaining mortgage, rental income covering a large portion of my expenses, and a line of credit for liquidity. The structure was tight, but it wasn't finished. In June of 2025, I made the final decision. I cashed out my 401k. There were tax consequences. Some people would disagree with that move, but for me, it simplified everything. I used the funds to eliminate the remaining duplex mortgage completely. No mortgage, no commercial debt, no consumer debt, everything free and clear. And after paying everything off, I still had about $26,000 left over in cash. That became my emergency fund. At that point, I was no longer using lines of credit for liquidity because I wasn't employed anymore. I was depending fully on rental income. So I shifted from access to capital to actual cash reserves. That put me in a much safer position. Today, rental income is about $2,300 per month. Living expenses are a little over $1,800 per month. Cash flow exceeds expenses. That's financial independence. But here's something people don't talk about enough. Freedom isn't just about not working. It's about options because my expenses are low and my assets produce income. Therefore, I can choose what I work on. If I want to work, I can. If I don't, I don't. If I want to take a lower paying job that I enjoy more, I can because I don't need as much income to survive. That's the difference between needing to work and choosing to work. And that's when I retired early, at 43. Now, I want to be transparent about something. I bought my properties pre-COVID. Prices were lower and rates were lower. That helped. But the structure is what mattered most. Lower expenses first. Then buy income-producing assets. Use leverage carefully. Recycle capital. Eliminate debt strategically. And build cash reserves before stepping away. Here's why the structure matters. Markets change, interest rates change, prices change, but math doesn't change, because if income from assets exceeds expenses, you're free. Now, if I were starting over today in this market, I would structure it a little differently. The principles wouldn't change, but the execution would. I'll break that down in the next video. I'm not special. I didn't invent anything. I just followed a structure long enough for it to compound. If you're serious about structuring your life intentionally, not emotionally, then this channel is about one thing: running yourself like a business. No hype, no shortcuts, just structure. If that resonates with you, subscribe. And if this helped you rethink what's possible, hit that like button. Thanks for watching.